Look, I love working with President Trump. Nobody's more engaged in the legislative process. And I've worked with a lot of presidents going back to George W. Bush. President Trump made phone calls, brought people to the White House when there were problems with the vote coalition. He just called, Steve, give me names. And he called all of those members. You don't want to be on the other end of that call, by the way. Look, he's good at, both, using honey and using the hammer. I mean, he'll use both. But he knows how to close the deal. He knew he was going to deliver, and he knew we were going to get the coalition. He helped us get the votes to deliver that coalition. And now the country's going to benefit in a tremendous way, and we're going to see economic growth like we've never seen in generations.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Signal Sitdown, but before we get to the interview, we'd love it if you'd hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you may be joining us. And please remember to give us a 5-star review because we love your feedback. Remember, it's your government, and together we'll expose how it really works and how to affect real change. Without further ado, here's the interview.
House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, welcome to the Signal Sitdown.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course, and thank you for doing this. We are here at the Cannon House office building doing a little new media row with the Republican Study Committee. Of course, 10 days ago, just over 10 days ago now, we passed the One Big Beautiful Bill. What is this bill going to do for the average American family? And as we look at these next 18 months before the midterms, what metrics are you guys looking at to see if this is delivering for the American people?
Yeah, this bill is going to deliver a lot of big wins for hardworking families. If you think about it, you go back to the election, President Trump ran on a lot of specific things. I'm going to secure the border. I'm going to make sure we don't have a tax increase on American families, which if Congress did nothing, then you would have had the largest tax increase, $4.5 trillion, primarily hitting middle and low-income families. We staved that off and prevented that in the One Big Beautiful Bill, which, by the way, every Democrat voted no, meaning every Democrat voted to raise taxes on every family in America. We also went further. President Trump said in the campaign on every stop, we're going to have no tax on tips. We're going to have no tax on overtime. We delivered on those promises as well in the One Big Beautiful Bill. So you think about a tip worker, you're at a restaurant, waiter or waitress that's serving you, on average they make about $32,000 a year. No tax on tips means about $1,700 more in their pocket. It's real money for working families. Not the billionaires the Democrats lied about. I'm talking about blue-collar, hard-working people. No tax on overtime, same thing. A shift worker at a local plant making things in America won't have to pay taxes on overtime. But that also means your local nurses at a hospital, your police officers. I know the Democrats want to defund the police. We want to support our men and women in uniform, protecting our communities. Now when they're working extra hours away from their family, they won't be paying taxes on overtime. This is going to get the economy moving again. You think about what it means for next year. It means our economy is going to be humming. You'll see inflation come down, interest rates come down. That first-time home buyer can actually go out and buy a home again. They couldn't do that under Joe Biden and his economy. And the Democrats were against all of it. We also modernize our air traffic control system in this bill. It's a big priority of President Trump and Sean Duffy, who's doing a great job at Department of Transportation. Think about it. Joe Biden looked the other way. Buttigieg, when he was running the department, they knew they had to modernize a traffic control system. It was running off of floppy drives. I'm a computer programmer. When I was in college in the 80s, we learned how to program on floppy drives. And then we got rid of them in the 90s when technology advanced. But you go to LaGuardia, they're still using those floppy drives, the 80s technology. Let's actually modernize our air traffic control system, get into the 21st century, and not have these days where entire air traffic systems across the country shut down. We fixed that in the One Big Beautiful Bill. Federal school choice. First time ever, we created a federal school choice program that every state will be able to participate in. That's in this bill. Every Democrat voted no. You go to next year during the elections when families are seeing the benefits of this, and it's going to be a great contrast. Your Democrat opponent was against all of these reforms. They wanted higher taxes. They wanted more government control. We wanted to put more power back in the hands of families and more money back in the pockets of families.
And they've already rolled out their 2026 messaging strategy, which is they're just going to whack you over the head with Medicaid
and
as
lies
much as
about
possible.
Medicaid, right?
That's what they're going to do. You looked at, this process started in the House. You hit the Memorial Day deadline, get it through, it goes to the Senate, and it comes back pretty quickly from the Senate, and you guys got to go on this to hit the president's July 4th deadline. Medicaid cuts in the Senate were a little bit more expansive than the House version of the bill. There were several other changes in the upper chamber that you guys received. When you read that bill for the first time, what did you think? Were you concerned about its viability with your members? Why wasn't there a larger fight potentially to change some of the provisions that made you guys a little nervous?
Yeah, we were always on a razor's edge with this bill. You go back to the beginning when we had, budget reconciliation's a two-step process. You have to do the budget, then you can get to reconciliation. When we did the budget component of this, we only had a 2-seat majority. Remember, it was before those special elections in Florida. And we already knew there was one member who was voting no. So we couldn't lose any more votes, and we didn't. So we barely got the budget through, but we got it through. And we beat the deadline, which, by the way, the left-wing media up here was rooting against this bill every step of the way. We didn't care about that because we knew failure was not an option. We had to deliver for those voters who went to the polls. We had to deliver for President Trump, and we did. Then when the bill came back from the Senate, they made a few changes, some good, some bad. We had to weigh all of that, and ultimately we looked at it and said, number one, does it achieve all the things that President Trump and House Republicans wanted to achieve at the beginning? No tax increases, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. Historic cuts, by the way, in waste, fraud, and abuse in government. $1.6 trillion in cuts to waste, fraud, and abuse. The record for any Congress before that was $800 billion, even adjusted for inflation. So we more than doubled the historic record of cuts. So we did all of those things in a fiscally responsible way, and we achieved economic growth. And so we said, look, we can get this bill to the president's desk and still hit every target we set out to achieve. Nobody thought that could happen, by the way, and we did it, and President Trump signed the bill. He can't be happier. We've got a great bill to go sell now, and we're going to see economic growth like we haven't seen, and we're going to see deficit reduction, because I believe in free market capitalism and economic growth like you do. The people that don't believe in it, that think higher taxes yield more money to government, higher taxes just mean you run more people out. You see it in California, in New York. We couldn't let that happen to the United States of America, and we staved it off. You're going to see great economic growth now.
You mentioned Senate made some changes, some for the good, some for the bad. When one of the big sticking points for, I think, the House membership in the last 3-4 years now has been time to read what they've got put in front of them. 72 hours has been the number constantly floated around, but you guys are moving really quickly on this, and one of the complaints from some of these members was this Senate bill was in flux until the very last minute with whatever Elizabeth, the parliamentarian, was saying over there, and we needed some time to digest that. As you are talking to your leadership colleagues, as you're talking to some of these committee chairmen who put together these pieces of legislation, receiving those changed products, what was the whipping process like to say, hey, we know we want to do things by regular order, but we've got to do this faster, on a faster timeline?
Well, the first thing we wanted to make sure was everybody did have enough time to truly digest what was in the bill, and they did. In fact, if you look at what left the House, 11 committees were involved, and every one of those committees had their work done in public and on C-SPAN. You could go to the hearing, you could watch it. A lot of our members were on those committees. Again, 11 committees that did all of that work. And then very few changes were made on the House floor. And then over 85% of the items that were in the House version ended up in the final version that came back to us, over 85%. So there weren't a lot of changes made in the Senate. Some, I would argue, were better changes, limiting the provider tax, which is a money laundering scheme that even President Obama and President Biden said needed to be reformed. President Trump said we needed to reform that too, and that ended up being in the bill. But anybody that wanted to read the bill had an opportunity, and in fact, the Senate read the bill. They had a reading of the entire bill, 900 pages, on the Senate floor. It took about 14 hours. So anybody that said, oh, I need time to read the bill, they had that opportunity, or they could have just tuned into C-SPAN 2 and watched the Senate
the longest
read
podcast
the bill.
ever.
And I don't know, there might have been 50 people, more than watched C-SPAN, but I mean, however many people watched it, you had not only opportunity, you had more than enough time to read the entirety of the bill, and it was read in its entirety on the Senate floor. By the time it came back, you knew the changes that were made. Yeah, there were maybe some items we'd like to make a little bit better, but at the end of the day, you also need the votes to pass the bill. The Senate not only barely passed it, the Senate needed Vice President Vance to come in and break the tie, and he did. And so it showed you just how narrow these margins are. You know, if I wrote it on my own, it would look different, just as if you wrote it on your own. But by the way, that bill wouldn't have gotten to President Trump's desk, because in the House you need 217 other people who agree with you. In the Senate you need 49 other people who agree with you, and then get J.D. Vance to break the tie. So in a narrow group of majorities, we delivered on some of the most historic wins for the American people. Again, this was for hard-working families in America. You know, Medicaid alone, the lies they told about Medicaid, everybody's going to die. The only changes that were made to Medicaid primarily were work requirements. Work requirements that Bill Clinton put in place mostly. You know, on the food stamp.
You can also just be a volunteer.
In the SNAP program. Yeah. So if you're a 35-year-old able-bodied adult sitting at home playing video games in your mom's basement, you can still do that. Just don't ask the taxpayers of America to pony up $40,000 a year for you to get freebies from the government. You have to go look for work. There's a lot of jobs out there. You're going to find work, and you're going to be better off. You'll get a good job. So ultimately, those were the changes, and illegals will no longer be able to be on those programs, which means if you're a disabled person on Medicaid, which Democrats shamelessly tried to exploit, it's going to work better for you now, because you're not going to be crowded out of good health care by able-bodied adults and illegals who right now are taking away the good health care that is deserved for disabled people. Those people will no longer be eligible, so it just will focus on disabled people, pregnant women, the people that it was set up to help.
What a difference a year makes.
Yeah.
When we were talking about spending fights in the previous Congress, I don't know, just sometimes it felt like Speaker Johnson was going in there 3v1 because Mitch McConnell...
It really was.
I'm not asking you to speak out of school on the former leader.
The Speaker was heavily outnumbered before, but today it's a new day.
It's a new day, and we
President
have
Trump is leading that fight.
That's exactly my next question. President Trump's involvement in this process. What was that like, working with him on this bill? What was his impact in getting that across the line?
Look, I love working with President Trump. Nobody's more engaged in the legislative process. And I've worked with a lot of presidents going back to George W. Bush. President Trump made phone calls, brought people to the White House when there were problems with the vote coalition. He just called, Steve, give me names. And he called all of those members. You don't want to be on the other end of that call, by the way. But President Trump knows how to close the deal. Look, he's good at, both, using honey and using the hammer. I mean, he'll use both. But he knows how to close the deal. He wrote The Art of the Deal. But I got to see it play out. This is a president who knows the policy, but he also understands what's at stake for the country, the people that he promised that he would make life better for. He knew he was going to deliver, and he knew we were going to get the coalition. He helped us get the votes to deliver that coalition, and now the country's going to benefit in a tremendous way, and we're going to see economic growth like we've never seen in generations.
Final question for you. You guys cannot be done delivering for the American people.
I'm not tired of winning.
We're just getting started.
Yeah.
At the beginning of this process, there was conversations about a one-bill process or a two-bill process. Speaker Johnson, House leadership were an advocate of a one-bill process. Use that leverage of immigration, use that leverage of tax cuts, and make sure that we can get something across.
Production, all the great stuff, yes.
Get it across the line with these narrow majorities that we have. In the last few weeks, though, you guys have talked about multiple reconciliation packages. Is that something that we should expect? And furthermore, as we head into an election year, we're talking about appropriations, potential government shutdown. I mean, what's coming down the pike? What should the American people be paying attention to as you guys go about your business?
Yeah, well, it won't be breaking news, but today on the House floor, we're going to be taking up the defense appropriations bill, which is more than half of all the discretionary spending that we do, that one bill. We'll be well over probably 60% of all appropriations passed by the House by the end of this week. And we're going to keep bringing more. In the Senate, under John Thune, they've committed to actually move appropriations bills. Schumer never did that. Schumer sat on all those bills because he wanted a shutdown.
Do you think they want to shut down again?
Schumer still does, but at the end of the day, Schumer's not running the Senate, thank God. And we have adult leadership in Congress, and we have a leader in Donald Trump. And so we're going to keep delivering for the American people. We've talked about a second reconciliation bill, but we knew we had to have one bill, not two. If you bifurcate the bill, you would have had some people vote for the first bill and some voted for the second bill, and we wouldn't have passed either one. We put it all in one bill because we knew to deliver on all these important wins. Let's put it all together and get the win, and then get the momentum to go do more things. But you can only have momentum to do more things by delivering on the first thing. This first thing is one big, beautiful bill, and boy, it's going to do wonderful things. Let's keep winning. Let's keep delivering for the American people.
House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, thank you for coming on the Signal
Great to be
Sitdown.
with you. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Signal Sitdown. Before you go, be sure to hit like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you may be joining us. And please remember to give us a 5-star review. We not only love your feedback, but it really does help the show. Remember, it's your government, and together we'll expose how it really works. See you next time.